is to remember everything we've been studying for all these years, because it's about to be basically laid out in 2 chapters, as this is the way it is. Okay? And I'm happy because it's not in any way in any conflict of everything I've already been telling you. So it's page 161, chapter 17. The sovereign teacher and parent of the Buddhism of the sowing of the latter day of the law. Okay? Those are the 3 virtues, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have those 3 virtues? Yes. Parent, teacher, and sovereign also applies to you. Yeah. Spreading the fragrant breeze of compassion in a defiled age. And President Kate is going to now qualify why it's not outrageous for me to have just said that. From this chapter, and we will, from this chapter, we will finally begin an in-depth discussion of the 3 virtues, sovereign, teacher, and parent, in terms of the Buddhism of the sowing of the latter day of the law, the subject that occupies the conclusion of the opening of the eyes. With the passage, I, Nichiren, am sovereign, teacher, and father and mother to all the people of Japan, the Daishonin declares that it is he who possesses all 3 virtues, sovereign, teacher, and parent of the latter day. This passage also forms the basis for the opening of the eyes, being designated as the writing that clarifies the object of devotion in terms of the person. While this is a passage of manifold significance, let's focus on the fact that, let's focus on the fact that compassion and action constitutes the essence of these 3 virtues. Compassion is the heart of Buddhism and the essence of the Lotus Sutra. I'll say it again. Compassion is the heart of Buddhism and the essence of the Lotus Sutra. Lack of compassion totally contradicts the spirit of Buddhism. A lack of compassion totally contradicts the spirit of Buddhism. In an earlier scripture, the Sutta Nipata, Shakyamuni, the founder of Buddhism, explains that loving kindness, namely compassion, is proof of enlightenment. He says that one who is skillful in respect of the ultimate good and has attained the peaceful state, the enlightened state of a Buddha, evinces the following benevolent sentiments. Let all living beings indeed be happy and secure. Let them be happy-minded, whichever are seen or unseen, whichever live far or near. Whether they already exist or are going to be, let all living beings be happy-minded. Just as a mother would protect her own life with her own son, her only son, just as a mother would protect with her life her own son, her only son, so should one cultivate the unbounded mind of the loving kindness towards all beings and loving kindness towards all the world. In other words, those who have attained true enlightenment feel infinite compassion toward all living beings in the entire world. Without such a spirit, one cannot be called genuinely enlightened. So do you understand? Mm-hmm. Do you understand what he's saying? So there's no animosity, there's no animality in a Buddha doing shakabuku. This isn't about being right. This is about propagating the correct teaching and fighting delusion. With such a spirit, one cannot be called genuinely enlightened. True enlightenment is the wellspring of inexhaustible compassion, and compassion is the proof of true enlightenment. Nichiren took on the challenge of spreading the spirit of compassion in the latter day of the law, a defiled age when people are indifferent to others' suffering and succumb easily into a life state of anger, constantly quarreling and fighting among themselves and growing ever more arrogant. The votary of the Lotus Sutra assumes the noble role of a courageous spiritual pioneer who, undaunted by adversity, spreads the fragrant breeze of compassion in this dark and troubled age. Did you understand what he just said there? What did he just qualify? Did he say the SGI member is no? Let me read it again, because he's talking about you being the Buddha. He's talking about you living the life of the Buddha. Nichiren took on the challenge of spreading the spirit of compassion in the latter day of the law. That spreading that spirit of compassion is doing shakabuku. That's what they're talking about, right? They're not talking about happy talk where you go around telling everybody how good looking they are. All right? Compassion in the latter day of the law, a defiled age when people are indifferent to others' suffering and succumb. Okay, indifferent to others' suffering means that they don't really care. They don't see it. They're so wrapped up in their own perception of life that they don't see the reality of others around them. Therefore, they feel nothing toward that. Do you understand? It's impossible to be the Buddha and be that way. All right? That indifference is gone. Because you now have a mission for what? Widespread propagation. How could you be indifferent about suffering? Right? That's what you've devoted your life to overcoming, correct? As the Buddha. So he says, Nichiren took on the challenge of spreading this spirit of compassion, teaching this manner in the latter day of the law, a defiled age when people are indifferent to others' suffering and succumb easily into a life state of anger, constantly quarreling and fighting among themselves and growing ever more arrogant. The votary of the Lotus Sutra assumes the noble role of a courageous spiritual pioneer. What's a spiritual pioneer? That means you're doing things that are not common yet. You're at the forefront of the beginning of correct thinking, correct action. Okay? You're at the forefront of the literal merging of the bodhisattvas of the earth. Do you understand? The votary of the Lotus Sutra assumes the noble role of a courageous spiritual pioneer who, undaunted by adversity, no matter what happens, spreads the fragrant breeze of compassion in this dark and troubled age by propagating the correct teaching. Infinite encouragement and strict refutation. Going to the Gosho. If we examine the Treasure Tower chapter of the Lotus Sutra, we find Shakyamuni Buddha, many treasures Buddha, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions who are emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha gathering together. And why? As the sutra itself says, each has come to this place on purpose to make certain the law will long endure. Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the other Buddhas intend to ensure the future propagation of the Lotus Sutra so that it can be made available to all the children of the Buddha in times to come. We may surmise from this that their concern and compassion are even greater than those of a father and mother who see their only child inflicted with great suffering. The Nimbutsu priest Honen, however, shows not the least concern about their compassion, but would tightly shut the gates to the Lotus Sutra in the latter day of the law so no one would have access to it. Take a person who tricks a demented child. Like a person who tricks a demented child into throwing away a treasure, he tries to induce people to discard the Lotus Sutra, a shameless thing to do indeed. Right? He's talking about Honen and Nimbutsu. If someone is about to kill your father and mother, shouldn't you try to warn them? If a bad person who is insane with drink is threatening to kill his father and mother, shouldn't you try to stop him? If some evil person is about to set fire to the temples and pagodas, shouldn't you try to stop him? If your only child is gravely ill, shouldn't you try to cure him or her with moxibustion treatment? To fail to do so is to act like those people who see but do not try to put a stop to the Zen and Nimbutsu followers in Japan. As Chang'an says, if one befriends another person but lacks the mercy to correct him, one is in fact his enemy. Everybody's clear, right?
Right.
I, Nichiren, am sovereign, teacher, and father and mother to all the people of Japan. But the men of the Tendai school who do not refute misleading teachings are all great enemies of the people. As Chang'an has noted, one who rids the offender of evil is acting as his parent. Back to President Ikeda's lecture. Compassion is the hallmark of all Buddhists. Awaken to the truth that the ultimate law of the universe exists within their own lives. Awaken to Aksho Ichinen Sanzen, right?
Yeah.
Buddhas are aware that this law also resides in the lives of all others. That's what makes them Buddhas. All people are inherently entities of this fundamental law. All people are inherently Buddhas, and as such have the potential to manifest the life state of Buddhahood. When deluded by ignorance, however, people fail to realize this. They are swayed by various phenomena and suffer as a result. Everybody's with me, right? Recognizing that all human beings are entities of the mystic law, and individuals endowed with the potential for Buddhahood, Buddhas feel loving kindness toward them, similar to that of a mother toward her child. People's suffering derives from their ignorance of the dignity of their own lives. Buddhas grieve when they see such suffering and overflow with profound empathy that causes them to feel the other's pain and anguish as if it were their own. They want it to stop for those other individuals. Tears of grief, smiles, sadness, joy. Buddhists share all of these. They place absolute trust in people and believe in their potential. They believe in their potential as Buddhas, right?
Right.
They love them and have boundless affection for them. Their compassion is entirely free of discrimination and extends to all, even the people that are doing really bad things. All right? Accordingly, it is as broad and vast as the universe. As we see in the quote I cited earlier from the Sutta Nipata, this benevolent goodwill of Buddhas, plural, is not only directed toward everyone they encounter in their immediate environment, but also to all imaginable people, unseen and unknown, encompassing the whole of humankind and all sentient and insentient beings. Does everybody understand what I just said? Let me read it again. As we see in the quote I cited earlier from the Sutta Nipata, this benevolent goodwill of the Buddha is not only directed toward everyone they encounter in their immediate environment, but also to all imaginable people, unseen and unknown, all living beings, encompassing the whole of humankind and all of sentient and insentient beings. So the whole threefold world, right? Pardon me, the entire three realms. This is the reality of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life demonstrated by Buddhists. Okay? This is the perception and understanding of actual Ichinen Sanzen. Everything is connected, right? Everything is equal. In short, Buddhas are not simply enlightened to their own inherent power. They recognize the potential of all living beings and continually devote their energies to helping them actualize that potential. Unlock your true humanity. Awaken to your potential. This is the fervent wish of Buddhas. Their compassionate encouragement is an unending paean to the human being and a reverent salute to life itself. This is also why Buddhists seek to vanquish ignorance and fundamental darkness, and why they sternly denounce the arrogance of those who denigrate others and do not believe in life's potential. Believe in life's potential. The potential he's talking about is potential of Buddhahood for all. Okay? There are no truly evil people. All Buddha's benevolent and courageous actions for others are infused that would make them lack the Buddha nature. All Buddha's benevolent and courageous actions for others are infused with compassion and empathy. They are dedicated to relieving suffering and imparting joy, as well as encouraging positive growth and rebuking error and wrongdoing. Okay? What did that just say? This is also why Buddhists seek to vanquish ignorance and fundamental darkness. Okay? In other words, they seek to allow everyone else to perceive their Buddha nature like they have themselves. Do you understand? Yes. And who sternly denounce the arrogance of those who denigrate others and do not believe in life's potentials. They sternly rebuke those that don't believe everyone is a Buddha exactly as they are, or do not believe in the potentiality of others to attain that high life state. All Buddha's benevolent and courageous actions for others are infused with compassion and empathy. All those actions are for the purpose of those individuals they're trying to help, not for the self-embellishment of their own status, okay, or the imparting of their wisdom, right? Infused with compassion and empathy. What does empathy mean? It means that they actually understand that ignorance. They were ignorant themselves before. They weren't born actual Ichinen Sanzen people. They were theoretical Ichinen Sanzen people too. They understand. They have empathy for ignorance. They don't think it's a bad thing. They don't disrespect people because they're ignorant. They have compassion and wisdom and empathy. They've been there, done that. They try to figure out, how can I help you understand what I've already been so fortunate to grasp myself because of my teacher? How can I help become a teacher to you, to help guide you toward the correct thinking that actually exists at the core of your life? You already know all this. That's what I'm saying. They are dedicated to relieving suffering and imparting joy by getting people to practice the daimoku, the Buddhism of the sowing, right? That's how they relieve suffering and impart joy. They don't go around and, you're not sick anymore, here's $1 million. No, they don't do it that way, right? They give people the means to achieve it themselves, as well as encouraging positive growth, encouraging people constantly, and rebuking error and wrongdoing, doing shakabuku, right? Mm-hmm. All right. The 3 virtues is expounded in the Lotus Sutra. Everybody's with me, right?
Yes.
The Lotus Sutra, which is the essence of Shakyamuni's Buddhism, is a teaching that elucidates the supreme compassion of the Buddha who strives to lead all people to enlightenment. What would that be? Who would that be? Who would that Buddha be?
We all.
Every one of us that's of the same mind as Nichiren.
Yes.
Right? Every one of us is able to achieve actuation and sanzen. Nichiren refers to the Lotus Sutra as the ultimate principle of compassion from reciting the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. In the Lotus Sutra, this ultimate compassion of the Buddha is expounded as the 3 virtues: sovereign, teacher, and parent. Similarly in parable, the 3rd chapter of the Lotus Sutra, which appears in the theoretical teaching, first half of the Lotus Sutra, contains the well-known passage, "There is no safety in the threefold world. It is like a burning house." This actual world in which we dwell is like a burning house. I mean, is this not apropos to right now? I love this this is great stuff I'm reading you. Please take it all in. This actual world in which we dwell is like a burning house. It is filled with suffering, pains, and trials. The sutra explains that the Buddha acts tirelessly to save the inhabitants from this perilous realm. And the section that follows the above quote contains passages that clearly correlate with the 3 virtues. Now this threefold world is all my domain, represents the virtue of sovereign. The living beings in it are all my children, indicates the virtue of parent. And I am the only person who can rescue and protect others, points to the virtue of teacher. That's all from the Lotus Sutra, right? Mm-hmm. Lifespan, the 16th chapter, which appears in the essential teaching, latter half of the Lotus Sutra, meanwhile, reveals that Shakyamuni actually attained enlightenment in the remote past and has been continuously in the world taking compassion and action to help all people become Buddhas, all people to become Buddhas. In a compilation of Nichiren's teachings on the Lotus Sutra, called The Record of the Orally Transmitted Teachings, passages are cited from the Jigage verse section of the Lifespan chapter that indicate the 3 virtues embodied by the Shakyamuni of original enlightenment in the remote past. Okay, that's Nichiren, by the way. That Shakyamuni is the original teacher. By the Shakyamuni of original enlightenment. You get it? Of original attainment in the remote past. Hence, this my land remains safe and tranquil corresponds to the virtue of sovereign. Constantly I have preached the law, teaching and converting corresponds to the virtue of teacher. And I am the father of this world corresponds to the virtue of parent. As we can see, the meaning of the 3 virtues is roughly the same in both the theoretical and essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. You with me? Mm-hmm. He just gave you 3 versions of the same thing, right? Or 2 versions of the same 3 points. Now let's examine the key points relating to these passages. Virtue of sovereign. Now this threefold world is all my domain. This, my land, remains safe and tranquil. Okay, those are the two from theoretical first half and from the essential second half, right? Okay, virtue of parent, theoretical. The living beings in it, the threefold world, are all my children. Essential, I am the father and I am the father of this world, right? Virtue of teacher, I am the theoretical. I am the only person who can rescue and protect others from the essential. Constantly, I have preached the law, teaching and converting. In the passages relating to the virtue of sovereign, the Buddha says that the actual world of suffering is his domain and that it is inherently a safe and tranquil Buddha land. In other words, he's revealing for the first time the Sahe world is the Buddha land. It is the land of eternally tranquil light. Buddha land is not a separate land, someplace that we graduate to when we all become Buddhas. Get it? All right. He says, the Buddha says that the actual world of suffering is his domain and that it is inherently a safe and tranquil Buddha land. This can be read as expressing the Buddha's resolve to take personal responsibility for realizing and protecting the peace and security of the land and the people living in it. In the passages referring to the virtue of parent, the Buddha states that living beings are his children. This expresses, as I mentioned earlier, the Buddha's loving compassion for all living beings and his profound empathy for their suffering. In the passages corresponding to the virtue of teacher, the Buddha speaks of his actual efforts to teach people about the law and lead them to the Buddha way, freeing them from suffering and protecting them from harm. Expounding the law and guiding people to enlightenment is the key to genuine salvation in Buddhism. I'll say it again. Expounding the law, okay, and guiding people to enlightenment. So teaching people about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo and helping nurture the realization in guiding them that ultimately they're able to understand and perceive themselves as the Buddha. Rather than seeing the Gohonzon outside of themselves, they perceive themselves as being an innate part of the Gohonzon itself, right? And in that way, they're able to lead people to actual Ichinen Sanzen. Do you understand? The same way the original teacher does. That's why we all have the three virtues as part of our lives as Buddhas. The practice of the votary of the Lotus Sutra embodies the three virtues. Do you understand what he's saying here? How did he title this next section? He says the practice of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. He says the practice of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. Votary of the Lotus Sutra is somebody that's of the same mind as Nichiren. Somebody that attains actual Ichinen Sanzen in their present form. Do you understand? Somebody that is the Buddha. All right? The practice of the votary of Lotus Sutra embodies the three virtues. The passage, I, Nichiren, am sovereign teacher and father and mother to all the people of Japan, clarifies that the Daishonen's practice as the votary of the Lotus Sutra embodies the three virtues as an expression of the compassion of the Buddha expounded in the Lotus Sutra. In terms of Nichiren's practice, his efforts to establish the correct teaching in order to bring peace and security to the land correspond to the virtue of sovereign. He may also be said to possess this virtue, which is characterized by a commitment to protect and save all humankind because of his far-reaching vision for the widespread propagation of the mystic law throughout the entire world and for the westward transmission of Buddhism. Did everybody understand that? Yes. Okay. Next is the virtue of parent. The sufferings of the latter day arise from the fundamental evil of slander of the law. Therefore, Nichiren's pursuit of the Shakabuku method of propagation, strict refutation of slander of the law, is a struggle to empathize and to relieve people's sufferings, and so corresponds to the virtue of parent. As I discussed in the last chapter, Shakabuku is not motivated by a contentious heart, but is a fighting spirit to oppose evil. Accordingly, Shakabuku is not a manifestation of the world of anger or the realm of Asuras, as Nichiren terms it, but the world of Bodhisattva, characterized by genuine compassionate desire to free people from suffering. Okay? Hang on just a moment.
Goma? Yeah. Oh.
Sorry for the dogs, guys. Okay. Lastly, the virtue of teacher derives from the fact that Nichiren revealed and left for all future humankind the great law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which opens the door to universal enlightenment. If Shakabuku, refuting slander of the law, is a struggle to relieve people's suffering, then propagating Nam-myoho Renge Kyo is a struggle to impart joy. In this way, Nichiren's actions as the votary of the Lotus Sutra are themselves compassionate actions embodying the three virtues. Okay, so again, understand, in this way, Nichiren's actions as the votary of the Lotus Sutra are themselves compassionate actions embodying the three virtues. So that when we're of the same mind as Nichiren, aspiring to achieve widespread propagation, we are living as human beings in exactly the same manner. And that same compassion that Nichiren expressed is the compassion that we're expressing, which is the compassionate actions that embody the three virtues. Understand? So it's not theoretical. It's actualized in you as an entity of the mystic law. All people can practice compassion. It is vital to note that Nichiren Daishonin did not simply manifest these three compassionate virtues and work to save all living beings in the evil age of the latter day. He also established Shakabuku and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as a concrete practice so that all people could lead lives with compassion for others. In other words, he didn't just correct everybody about the Buddhism of the harvest. He initiated the Buddhism of the sowing. Do you understand? All right. So, and in doing so, establish the practice that common mortals can manifest their innate Buddha nature and actualize Ichino and Sanzo, which could not be done prior to the manifest teaching of the Buddhism of the sowing. Do you understand? That's what President Kate is talking about here. In other words, he not only lived a compassionate life himself, but also showed the way for all other people to do so. We may interpret this as being the true reason Nichiren is regarded as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. Right? He's the original teacher. No one else ever taught this teaching prior to Nichiren, even though it's predicated on the teachings of the Buddhism of the harvest as a foundation. And it was never actualized until the reality of Soka Gakkai as common lay people coming in society, doing Shakabuku, doing all this stuff that had never been done as practitioners within the different sects of Nichiren Buddhism. Do you understand? And so this actually what we're talking about right now never really got actualized until after World War II. Prior to World War II, with the beginning of the Soka Gakkai with President Makaguchi's efforts as, the Value Creation Education Society. Okay, so this is all actually right now and why it's so contemporary and what it's saying as to the times. President Toda explained the significance of Nichiren's appearance in the world as follows. Now dig this. This is Toda. As human beings, it's normal that we find it difficult to embark on a life of conscious compassion. Why? Because we live in the 9 worlds. Okay? Only one of them is really involved with true compassion. Most of the things we think are compassion, a lot of times it's just animality. Right?
Right.
Okay, that's where the importance of Nichiren's appearance comes in. 9th world is the gateway to the 10th world, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, the latter day of the law is an age when evil people abound and when acts of compassion are desperately needed. The reality, however, is that the world is lacking in compassion to the extreme. Even if the inherent essence of our lives is compassionate, we cannot become truly happy as human beings unless we cultivate the wisdom of the Buddha. We've got to perceive reality as it exists. Cultivating the wisdom of the Buddha, eliminating delusion from our lives, and living with true compassion is the key to all happiness. When we live our lives correctly, we can embody and help others see the correct path for themselves. This wisdom is gained only through faith, because the only teaching that teaches this way of thought is imparted only through faith. We need to bear this deeply in mind, okay? Because this whole principle is that you're the Buddha exactly as you are. Faith is the only thing that's going to get you to realize that as the truth, as a reality, rather than as a theoretical construct that's part of a big doctrinal foundation for a religious premise. Do you understand? This is what takes it from bullshit and makes it real. All right? But I shouldn't say bullshit. It takes it from theoretical and makes it actual. All right? But theoretical's bullshit when it comes to real life. It doesn't do you any good. It makes you feel better temporarily. It doesn't solve anything. That's why we have to do this one. That's why we have to spread this one. That's why we can't let a theoretical construct be enough. It's not enough.
No.
It doesn't change karma. It doesn't put people on the path to birth and death in the realm of Buddhahood. It doesn't provide an eternal salvation for them as it relates to their karmic construct of their gathering, their lifetime after lifetime. Okay? We need to bear this deeply in mind. It is far from easy for ordinary people of the latter day to live with compassion, but unless we can establish a way, unless a way can be established for them to do so, the original purpose of Buddhism will never be accomplished, making everyone equal to ourselves, right? The Buddhas appear in order to make all others equal to themselves. In this case, leading people to enlightenment, all Buddhas leading all others to be equal to themselves, in this polluted age could only be achieved by a Buddha of outstanding compassion, appearing from time to time to save people weary from suffering. In other words, a godlike, perfect Buddha-like in the Lotus Sutra's 16th chapter, right? With this kind of sporadic salvation, however, subsequent generations after the Buddha's passing will gradually forget the benefit of the Buddha's teachings and succumb once more to the malaise from which they previously suffered. This means that another Buddha would have to appear and once more help guide people to enlightenment. An alternative scenario is that people might put their faith in an imagined Buddha dwelling in some pure land far removed from this world and aspire to be reborn there. If such cycles continue repeatedly, it will be impossible to transform the real world of the latter day of the law. Do you understand? If that's the manner in which the spread of Buddhism is propagated, Kosen Rufu, for what Kosen Rufu actually is, can never be achieved, right? The fundamental error here is thinking that only a special Buddha can serve as a compassionate liberator of human suffering. Do you understand? He's saying, not even me, Daisaku Ikeda. I'm not that either. Do you understand? He's telling everybody that thinks he is that he isn't. To accept this belief shows a failure to grasp the true significance of Shakyamuni Buddha entrusting the bodhisattvas of the earth with the mission of widespread propagation, Kosen Rufu, in the latter day of the law. If the idea of a fixed relationship between an absolute savior and practitioners who need saving takes hold, then it will be impossible to create a world of mutual compassion, which is the goal of Buddhism. Essentially, to truly free people from suffering in this cold, cruel latter day is the appearance of a votary of the Lotus Sutra who inherits the three virtues of the Buddha, along with countless similar votaries, agents, and practitioners of compassion who unite their efforts around the central votary, the original teacher. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Okay? He's qualifying this now. He's talking about people that have achieved actual Ichinen Sanzen. He's not talking about people that are in it casually. Okay? Mm-hmm. He's talking about people that can see the mission of Kosen Rufu as their own. When you do, you already perceive yourself as the Buddha, whether you consciously understand that's what you're doing or not. That's the same mind as Nichiren. You're already there whether you can see it yet or not. Stage 5 is nothing more than stage 6 with the delusion of your true identity. You're doing all the same things. In the opening of the eyes, immediately before declaring that he possesses the virtues of sovereign teacher and parent in the latter day of the law, Nichiren indicates that Shakabuku is the correct method of propagation in a country like Japan that is filled with people of perverse views who slander the law, and he enjoins his followers to pursue the same course of practice as he. His true intent is to teach that by dedicating ourselves to the practice of Shakabuku, which is refuting error, right? Correcting misunderstandings, each of us can come to embody compassion and then spread that compassion throughout the world. Nichiren indicates that ordinary people, through the function of compassion, can form positive connections with others. Certainly, It's difficult for us ordinary people to readily bring forth compassion. Pardon me. But when we can summon courage instead. Let me read it again. Certainly it's difficult for us ordinary people to readily bring forth compassion, but we can summon courage instead. Mugiwashi. When we courageously practice and spread the law of compassion, those very efforts are equivalent to our having taken compassionate action. And such efforts will naturally lead to the development of infinite positive human relationships based on compassion, spreading from one person to another. Fake it till you make it. The 10th world will emerge. Our challenge lies in infusing the realm of fundamental darkness with the warm, life-affirming current of compassion and working dauntlessly to create a world where people have compassion for one another based on the Buddhist teaching of dependent origination, the principle of the interconnection of all things. By doing so, we carry on the legacy of Buddhism that originates from Shakyamuni and can further build on it into the future. Safeguarding the world of compassion, safeguarding the world of compassion of the Lotus Sutra. Is everybody with me? Yes. All right. The latter day of the law is characterized by the appearance of evil people who function to undermine this compassionate world of the Lotus Sutra. These evil people include not only those who actively seek to destroy Buddhism, but also individuals who, though they ought to protect and perpetuate the correct teachings of the Lotus Sutra, stand idly by and allow such destruction to take place. Now, do you understand what he just said there? Okay, what did he just say there? I'll read it again. The latter day of the law is characterized by the appearance of evil people who function to undermine this compassionate world of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, so evil people are going to appear, right? Okay. Doesn't say where necessarily. They appear anywhere they can become an obstruction. These evil people include not only those who actively seek to destroy Buddhism, those that are out there actively slandering, trying to convert people's thinking, but also individuals who, though they ought to protect and perpetuate the correct teaching of the Lotus Sutra, stand idly by and allow such destruction to take place. That means all other practitioners that do not do shakabuku, that do not refute error, are participating in error. They are slandering the law, even though they think they practice this Buddhism. Okay? He's going to qualify that. The presence of the second group is the root cause of the ills of the latter day of the law. Wow. The root cause of the ills of the latter day of the law isn't the evil people that are attacking the law. It's those people that could be protecting the law but are not.
Do not stand up.
Do you understand? That's what he's saying very clearly. That's an important thing for you to understand. Yeah. We're not supposed to be, we don't have to be so worried about those enemies that are coming with spears. We have to be more concerned about the complacency of our fellow practitioners that are actually not practicing even though they think they are. And through that lack of understanding can perpetuate that same misperception. They think they're practicing and they're not. Okay? Such irrepressible passive bystanders create a climate where destroyers of the law can flourish. Since it should be their mission to safeguard the correct teaching, the offense of these people is actually greater than that of those who actively seek to destroy the law. Be aware of that. Okay? You're not protected just because you chant. You're protected by being the Buddha. You chant as part of the function of your daily life. Your action is also just as important as your devotion. Do you understand? That's not really genuine. That's theoretical. You're looking at it outside of yourself if you're not protecting the law. You haven't done any studying because all it says is protect the law, protect the law, protect the law. Refute error, refute error, refute error. Nichiren's whole life was the example of standing up against insurmountable, no matter what. Doesn't care. Doesn't matter how many other people don't agree with me. Correct is correct. That's what the whole example of his whole life. And that's what he says. President K saying he's encouraging us to practice the same way. Okay? Hence, in the closing section of the opening of the eyes, immediately after his statement on the three virtues, the Daishonin denounces the Japanese Tendai school, saying, the men of the Tendai school who do not refute misleading teachings are all great enemies of the people. Now, don't forget that's Mount Hei, right? In Rakuji, those dudes are the Tendai school guys that were under Dingyo that ultimately took on the true word teaching, right? Because their school was originally based on the Lotus Sutra, they ought to have spread that sutra's message and ideals for the welfare and happiness of the people and stood up to refute the erroneous teachings of the Nembutsu priest Honen and others. Instead, they chose to curry favor with those in positions of status and authority. Nichiren reprimands such followers of the Tendai school, calling them great enemies of all the people of Japan. Of all the people of Japan. This refutation lies at the heart of Nichiren's religious revolution. In modern times, the Nichiren Shoshu priesthood should have risen into action to defend Nichiren Buddhism when it was threatened by the militarist authorities during World War II. Instead, they acquiesced to the forces of slander and even tried to oust and disassociate itself from the first Soka Gakkai president, Tetsubaro Makaguchi, who had stood up to protect the correct teaching. Remember? That's what I was talking about. Nichiren Shoshu priests are the spiritual descendants of the great enemies of Nichiren's time and deserve to be condemned as such. Those passive, self-serving bystanders gave birth to the corrupt and erroneous priesthood of Nichiren Shoshu that is today trying to destroy Kosen Rufu. By rigorously denouncing slander of the law, a genuine revolution in the realm of Buddhism can be achieved. If we undertake such a struggle, we are sure to be attacked. If we undertake such a struggle, we are sure to be attacked and maligned by those seeking to block change. Seeking to block change. They want it to be like it's always been. It can never be like it's always been. Nothing stays like it's always been. That's delusion. Do you understand? All right. Our first and second presidents, Tetsubaro Makaguchi and Josei Toda, however, regarded it as an honor to be criticized by such people. I do too. As our eternal mentors, President Makaguchi and President Toda forever hold high the banner of Soka. Today we have just celebrated the Soka Gakkai 75th anniversary, 2005. That was a long time ago. Shows you how long ago this was written. Countless noble, ordinary people called forth by these great leaders of the Bodhisattvas of the earth are illuminating the world with their brilliant light of compassion. We who embrace Nichiren Buddhism are dedicated to igniting hope in the hearts of people mired in the depths of suffering and to constructing a peaceful society in which all people, most especially mothers and children, can live in peace and security. Today, our movement has grown into a broad and deep river that flows throughout the world. I am confident that President Makaguchi and President Toda will rejoice at the valiant, compassionate actions of all our devoted members. I have no doubt that Nichiren too would praise the unceasing acts of compassion our intrepid Bodhisattvas of the earth perform daily in every land. The Soka Gakkai organization embodies the Buddha's compassion, taking pride in the fact that it is the legitimate heir to the virtues of sovereign teacher and parent, with a mission to transform the world's destiny in these unceasingly dark times. Let us construct a century of Soka with our sights set on the Soka Gakkai's 100th anniversary in the year 2030. What time is it?
8:48.
Because this is only like 4 pages long. 2 pages long. Okay? Going in. Chapter 18, page 169. Part 2 of this thing on the sovereign teacher and parent. The sovereign teacher and parent of the Buddhism, the sowing of latter day of law, part 2. That's why I wanted both of these together. I, Nichiren, am sovereign teacher and father and mother to all the people of Japan. That's from the Gosho. President Ikeda's lecture, starting on page 169. In the previous chapter, we discussed the passage above, which forms the conclusion reached by Nichiren Daishonin in the opening of the eyes, and delved into the profound meaning of the three virtues, sovereign, teacher, and parent of the Buddhism of the sowing of the latter day of the law, from the perspective of compassion. The main point is that of that discussion was that the three virtues reside in the compassionate action of the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day. In other words, the virtue of parent can be found in the efforts of the votary who, having empathy for people's suffering and cherishing their limitless potential, actively strives to propagate the mystic law while enduring intense opposition and persecution. That's any of us. Mm-hmm. The virtue of teacher can be found in the votary's struggle to bring an end to people's slander of the law arising from ignorance, to awaken them to faith in the mystic law, and to guide them toward enlightenment by revealing and propagating Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That could be any one of us, right? Mm-hmm. Finally, the virtue of sovereign can be found in the votary's deep sense of responsibility for the peace and security of all people, demonstrated in his wish for the widespread propagation of the law throughout the entire world. That is, for widespread Kosen Rufu, and the establishment of the correct teaching for the peace of the land. Nichiren's treatise on repaying debts of gratitude contains a well-known passage that clearly expresses the three virtues embodied by the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day. Three virtues embodied by Nichiren. I'll read that again, since we had a little bit of ringing going on there. Nichiren's treatise on repaying debts of gratitude contains a well-known passage that clearly expresses the three virtues embodied by the votary of the Lotus Sutra in the latter day, the three virtues embodied by Nichiren. If Nichiren's compassion is truly great and encompassing, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will spread for 10,000 years and more, for all eternity, for it has the beneficial power to open the blind eyes of every living being in the country of Japan, and it blocks off the road that leads to the hell of incessant suffering. Does everybody understand why he says that? Mm-hmm. If Nichiren's compassion is truly great and encompassing, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will spread for 10,000 years. So he's predicting that that will occur, and more, for all eternity, because it has the beneficial power to open the blind eyes. It has the beneficial power to take all living beings from Buddhism theory to hearing the names of the words and the truth, starting them on the path, and once they do that, it blocks off the road that leads to the hell of incessant suffering. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. All right, so to save the people of Japan in his day who had succumbed to the grave illness of slander arising from ignorance, lack of understanding of the correct teaching, Nichiren propagated Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the ultimate law that has the power to awaken and bring forth the inherent Buddha nature of all humankind. Whether it be in revealing the ultimate law or in waging a selfless struggle to propagate it, Nichiren's dedicated efforts were all an expression of his great and encompassing compassion, aimed at freeing people of the latter day from suffering of the most on the most fundamental level. Great and encompassing compassion corresponds to the virtue of parent, opening the blind eyes of all living beings, blind in terms of their slander of the law arising from ignorance, corresponds to the virtue of teacher, and blocking off the road that leads to the hell of incessant suffering, in other words, protecting not only the people of Japan in his day, but all humankind throughout the latter day by propagating Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and cultivating people's Buddha's nature, corresponds to the virtue of sovereign. Thus, the three virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent embodied by Nichiren may be considered virtues endowed in the struggle to reveal and propagate Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the seed of Buddhahood that activates the Buddha nature in the lives of all human beings. These are also referred to as the three virtues of the Buddhism of the sowing, which in the OTT qualifies we also possess, right? In the same sense, the passages in the opening of the eyes and on repaying debts of gratitude, which is one of the 10 major writings as well, where Nichiren declares that he possesses the three virtues, may be viewed as referring to the establishment of the Buddhism of sowing, which opens the path to enlightenment for all people into the eternal future of the latter day of the law. Second column, page 170, the transformative power of the Buddhism of sowing. Taking up the challenge of leading humanity to enlightenment in the defiled age of the latter day of the law, Nichiren urged people to cultivate their inherent Buddha nature, right? That's chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's what it's all about. By doing so, he opened the way to fundamentally transforming the times and people's lives. All suffering ultimately stems from not being aware of the law, slander of the law, or from a failure to believe in it, or even after encountering it, believe in it, or even after encountering it, conditions that arise from fundamental ignorance and delusion. The devil is sixth heaven. The enlightenment of the Buddha, actually Ichinen Sanzen, transforms this ignorance and delusion into wisdom. The wisdom to perceive your true identity, right? This does not mean eradicating earthly desires, but rather conquering, by means of faith, the ignorance or fundamental darkness that is the source of earthly desires, okay? That cause problems in your life. As a result, wisdom shines forth and an inner transformation to the life state of Buddhahood is realized. This potential to instantly transform ignorance into wisdom, just like the Buddha, is our Buddha nature. All life inherently possesses this nature. Is everybody with me? Yes. Right? Nichiren named the Buddha nature inherent in all life Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And he established the means whereby all people can attain Buddhahood in this lifetime through believing in and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, a process whereby we can change darkness into light, earthly desires into enlightenment, and achieve an unsurpassed state of life overflowing with benefits. That is the foundation of Nichiren Buddhism. Don't forget, the three virtues are the flip side of the three poisons, right? Yes. After declaring the establishment of his teaching, Nichiren made the practice of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo the basis for the enlightenment of people in the latter day, and gave his life to pursuing the great path of propagating the mystic law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Everybody's with me, right? Something that we must not overlook is that manifesting the world of Buddhahood in our lives entails an inner struggle to defeat, by means of faith, our fundamental ignorance of Buddhahood's universality. That is why Nichiren, in emphasizing the importance of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, also strictly warns that if we think Nam-myoho Renge-kyo exists outside ourselves, we are not embracing the mystic law. Okay? Everybody's with me, right? We've gone over this a million times. This inner transformation from ignorance to faith in the depths of our lives is the very heart of Nichiren Buddhism. This inner transformation from ignorance to faith in the depths of our lives is the very heart of Nichiren Buddhism, because that's the predication, that's the basis of actual Ichinen Sanzen, right? As we develop unshakable conviction in the mystic law, as we develop the Buddha nature of our Mugiwashin, our inherent Buddha nature is activated, and the life state of Buddha powerfully manifests. We start actually answering our own prayers. On the other hand, when we lack confidence and give in to disbelief, our Buddha nature falls dormant, and our lives at that moment become shrouded in darkness. And therefore, we are not so able to answer our own prayers. And since we are the ones answering our own prayers, it seems as though the Gohonzon has failed us, when in reality it's our ignorance of the true identity of the Gohonzon. Okay? Sowing the seed of Buddhahood is a figurative expression. Figurative. In other words, it really doesn't mean you're sowing the seed. The seed already existed since time without beginning, right? Right. Okay. Sowing the seed of Buddhahood is a figurative expression for activating the Buddha nature. Hearing the name and the words of the truth, right? In the Essentials for Attaining Buddhahood, Nichiren explains this very simply, saying, the Lotus Sutra is like the seed, the Buddha is like the sower, and the people like the field. After the seed has been planted by the sower, people can bring forth great fruit in the field of their heart. They themselves gain the fruit of Buddhahood. It is wrong, however, to interpret this to mean that the seed of Buddhahood does not exist in people's lives unless it is first planted there by the Buddha, because it's their original state. Original state means nothing preceded that. Do you understand? The law taught the original teacher. Don't forget that. The original state existed prior to that. The truth is that the Buddha nature already and naturally exists in people's lives. But since it is activated and nurtured into the life state of Buddhahood through the teachings of the Buddha, it seems as if the seed of Buddhahood is planted by the Buddha. Accordingly, the seed of Buddhahood in some cases refers to the Buddha nature inherent in people's lives, and in others indicates the teaching of the Buddha, which has the power to activate the Buddha nature. Do you understand? All right. So Nichiren cites the Lotus Sutra passage, the seeds of Buddhahood sprout as a result of conditions, and for this reason they, the Buddhas, preach the single vehicle from the properties of rice. The lives of all people are originally endowed with the Buddha nature, the cause for attaining Buddhahood. Are all originally endowed. Okay? The condition that activates the Buddha nature is the single vehicle, the Lotus Sutra, or in the latter day of the law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The bottom, page 171. Opening the way to the enlightenment of all people in the latter day. When the sowing of the seeds of Buddha, what the sowing of the seeds of Buddhahood actually means is to teach people to embrace faith in the mystic law, conquering ignorance and illuminating their lives with the light of wisdom. The profound inner transformation that results in the depths of people's lives activates their Buddha nature, bringing forth their potential for Buddhahood from within. On attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime, Nichiren writes, if the minds of living beings are impure, their land is also impure. What they experience in their daily life, how they see their surroundings. But if their minds are pure, so is their land. How they experience the reality changes. There are not two lands, pure or impure in themselves. The difference lies solely in the good or evil of our minds. It is the same with a Buddha and an ordinary being. When deluded, one is called an ordinary being. But when enlightened, when one has had their eyes open, one is called a Buddha. When the seeds of Buddhahood are planted in this way, people's hearts can be instantly transformed from delusion to enlightenment. To illustrate, as long as heavy clouds block the sunlight, the land will be dark. But once the clouds clear and the sun shines through, the land will be instantly illuminated. The land itself has not changed. Rather, the place that had been submerged in deep darkness is transformed into a bright land of hope. As Nichiren indicates when he speaks of a lantern lighting up a place that has been dark for 1,000, 100, 1,000, or 10,000 years, even a cave that has been pitch dark for incalculable eons can be suddenly illuminated. This is analogous to the power of This is analogous to the power of sowing the seeds of Buddhahood of the mystic law, awakening people to their original state of life. When we light a lamp amid the darkness of ignorance to that original state, the darkness immediately disappears. Immediately. They go from being in theory to hearing in the name of the words of the truth. They're on the path. It is instantly transformed. This is Nichiren Buddhism. God, I got goosebumps right now. The Buddhism of sowing. Nichiren is the Lord of teachings. The Buddha who chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the core doctrine of this Buddhism. We therefore regard him as possessing the three virtues of the Buddhism of the sowing in the latter day. In other words, we regard him as the Buddha of the latter day of the law, the original teacher. The Buddhism of sowing is the sole teaching that enables ordinary people of the latter day to attain Buddhahood. The sole teaching in the latter day. Notice that he's qualifying that. Middle day and former day, different time, different deal, different people. The eternity and universality of the three virtues of the Buddhism of the sowing. This is now where it all includes everybody equally. If Nichiren's compassion is truly great and encompassing, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will spread for 10,000 years and more for all eternity, for it has the beneficial power to open the blind eyes of every living being in the country of Japan, and it blocks off the road that leads to the hell of incessant suffering from unrepaying debts of gratitude. The passage above from on repaying debts of gratitude, which I also cited earlier, suggests that the three virtues embodied by Nichiren Daishonin will shine on in the eternal transmission of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The eternity of the three virtues derives from the universality of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. But the universality of the law alone does not assume its eternal perpetuation. Right? We are the living bodies of the law. We're the perpetuators. We do the work.
Yes.
Another indisputable element is people who strive to propagate the law. Through people's tenacious, committed efforts, the universality of the law shines and the law itself spreads. This is as Nichiren indicates when he says the law does not spread by itself because people propagate it. Both the people and the law are worthy of respect. That's why if you denigrate another human, it's slander of the law. Nichiren's conduct naturally shines with the three virtues because he waged a great struggle based on his profound compassion for all humankind to ensure that the law would be transmitted on into the eternal future. In the age after Nichiren's passing, the teaching that both the people and the law are worthy of respect is given true meaning when disciples propagate the law with the spirit of faith of not begrudging one's life exactly as Nichiren instructs. What did he just say there? In the age after Nichiren's passing, the teaching that both the people and the law are worthy of respect, in other words, they're the same, okay, is given true meaning when disciples propagate the law with the spirit of faith of not begrudging one's life. What is that? That's the same mind as Nichiren. When disciples propagate the law with the same spirit as Nichiren, that's when this is achieved. Do you understand? Exactly as Nichiren instructs. When disciples in a defiled age devote themselves to spreading the law with the spirit of the oneness of mentor and disciple, original teacher, and the bodhisattvas of the earth, Nichiren's three virtues will also shine in their lives. At the same time, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the law that they spread, manifests its original power to activate the Buddha nature in others' lives. As a result, those who embrace faith in the mystic law gain the immeasurable benefit of attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. They attain actual Ichen and Sunzen. Further, when the river of Kosen Rufu broadly expands in tandem with this propagation in which both the people and law are both worthy of respect, the power of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo that activates the Buddha nature will come to fill the land and spread throughout the world, becoming a force that can change the times. In other words, when the true law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is combined with the dedicated efforts of practitioners who uphold steadfast faith, then Nichiren's virtues of sovereign, teacher, and parent will bring rich benefit to flow throughout the 10,000 years and more of the latter day. The three virtues of Nichiren live on in the SGI, second column, page 173. We're almost done. November 2005 marked the auspicious 75th anniversary of the Soka Gakkai's founding. From the time of the first president, Tnesaburo Makaguchi, the Soka Gakkai has cherished deep conviction in the potential of Buddhism of sowing, translating it into action and widely sharing it with others. This is nothing short of extraordinary, given that many of the established Buddhist schools in Japan have devolved into purveyors of funeral Buddhism and are largely preoccupied with abstract theory unrelated to daily life, a trend that only highlights their limitations and ineffectiveness. President Makaguchi called on Soka Gakkai members to joyfully practice the correct teaching of Buddhism as a guide to daily life, as a principle of value creation, and he encouraged them to share it with others. He insightfully captured the essence of the Buddhism of sowing in these words: the greatest sense of purpose is one where, while remaining conscious of our own lives, we strive to base our lives on faith in the law of the universe that spans infinite time and space, and to live in harmony with that law. A life of the highest value that is guided by this supreme sense of purpose, in other words, a life of unsurpassed happiness, is so lived that one may bask in benefit that is shared by all humankind. It would be impossible to have this supreme sense of purpose without encountering the Lotus Sutra. That is perhaps what is meant by opening the eyes in Buddhism. Let me read that again. President Makaguchi. We don't get many of his quotes. President Makaguchi called on Soka Gakkai members to joyfully practice the correct teaching of Buddhism as a guide to daily life, as a principle of value creation. Knowing what things make good fortune and knowing what things make not good fortune. And as he encouraged them to share it with others, he insightfully captured the essence of the Buddhism of sowing in these words. The greatest sense of purpose is one where, while remaining conscious of our own selves, we strive to base our lives on faith in the law of the universe that spans infinite time and space, and to live in harmony with that law. Okay, everybody's with me? A life of the highest value that is guided by this supreme sense of purpose, in other words, a life of unsurpassed happiness, is so lived so that one may bask in benefit that is shared by all humankind. It would be impossible to have this supreme sense of purpose without encountering the Lotus Sutra. That is perhaps what is meant by opening the eyes in Buddhism. And don't forget, when we gain merit and fortune in our lives by becoming the Buddha in fact, by achieving actual Ichinen Sanzen, all of the merit and good fortune that we thereby gain and attain through our own actions and our life in the Sahe world, and is transferred as merit to the Buddha nature in all things. Don't forget, all Buddhas share in all Buddha's good fortune. So when you create good fortune, you're adding to the pile of good fortune. That's what he's talking about. He's saying right here, a life of the highest value that is guided by this supreme sense of purpose. What is this supreme sense of purpose? Bodhisattva of the earth, widespread propagation, Kosen Rufu. That's what that says. Being in harmony with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo would be to achieve Kosen Rufu, right? You see. So, a life of the highest value that is guided by this supreme sense of purpose. In other words, a life of unsurpassed happiness, because to be the Buddha is a life, okay, of unsurpassed happiness, no defeat, is so lived that one may bask in benefit. I get all this good fortune because I achieved actual Ichinen Sanzen through my own effort, but at the same time, all that benefit is shared with all other living beings. So is so lived that one may bask in benefit that is shared by everyone, not just yourself. When you attain Buddhahood, everyone shares in that benefit, not just you. It's not selfish. It's the most selfless thing you can do. Isn't that cool? To become the Buddha is the most selfless thing you can do, because you become the teacher. Okay? And the reason you become the teacher, the way you became the teacher, is to live in the Sahe world, in the 9 worlds of everybody else. It would be impossible to have this supreme sense of purpose without encountering the Lotus Sutra. This is what is meant by opening the eyes in Buddhism. President Makaguchi asserted that the purpose of the Lotus Sutra's teachings is for us to lead lives of the highest value creation by fusing our lives with mystic law, the fundamental law of the universe. The second Soka Gakkai president, Josei Toda, while imprisoned for his opposition to Japanese militarism during World War II, had an experience in which he realized that the Buddha is life itself, and awakened to this identity as a bodhisattva of the earth, advocating the idea of human revolution. Now again, Makaguchi and Toda didn't exactly express all this in lockstep. Do you understand? That's what he's trying to qualify. You all have Buddha wisdom. Based on dependent origination, you're all going to manifest it for the purpose of saving others. And what comes out of your mouth is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, no matter what words are. Do you understand? Okay. The second president, Josei Toda, while in prison for his opposition to the Japanese military, had an experience in which he realized that the Buddha is life itself and awakened to his identity as a bodhisattva of the earth. Advocating the idea of human revolution Mr. Toda, which is, again, Makaguchi said devotion to a sense of purpose. The sense of purpose is actually now shown by President Toda's teaching as human revolution. That's where that comes from. Human revolution comes from Toda. Vowing to expand the Soka Gakkai's membership to 750,000 households. President Toda also had a profound understanding of the essence of the Buddhism of sowing. Nichiren Buddhism is a teaching of ultimate humanism. I am ever more convinced, now he says first person, he says, Daisaku Ikeda thinks that I am ever more convinced that this humanism, rooted in a belief in people's fundamental capacity for change, which lies at the heart of the Buddhism of sowing, is exactly the kind of humanism the world now needs. It is not going too far to say that the movement for peace, culture, and education that we are promoting is an expression of this Buddhist humanism. Some 30 years have passed since I began to earnestly engage the world's leading intellectuals in dialogue across civilizations. In these discussions, it has always been my aim to transcend differences of culture, religion, and ideology, and to focus instead on the basic common denominator of the human being. I have sought to deepen mutual understanding by expressing the humanistic ideals of Nichiren Buddhism through the concept of human revolution. Everything depends on human beings. When people change for the better, thereby inspiring fresh hope, the world will also change for the better. That is the cornerstone of the Buddhism of sowing. I have been sharing this message through the philosophy of human revolution, which is based on the conviction that a human revolution is just a human revolution in just a single individual will help achieve a change in the destiny of a nation, and further will enable a change in the destiny of all humankind. Many eminent scholars I have spoken with, such as the British historian Arnold Toynbee, the French art historian René ریگ, and the Austrian thinker and proponent of European unification, Count Richard something I can't pronounce, have expressed deep concord with the idea of human revolution. Also through our discussions, co-founder of the Global Think Tank Club of Rome and fighter in the Italian anti-fascist underground during World War II, came to rephrase what he had previously termed humanistic revolution as human revolution. He said that this revolution in the hearts and minds of human beings alone can help us understand that we must now shoulder for the first time long-term global responsibilities and strive to leave to coming generations a more livable planet and a more governable society. The age has arrived when people throughout the world yearn for Nichiren's humanistic Buddhist teachings. Indeed, the time has come for each of us to demonstrate the illuminating power of the three virtues of the Buddhism of sowing that can activate the Buddha nature of all humankind. Our network for Kosen Rufu now encompasses the entire globe, and people everywhere will be watching our spirited efforts in this endeavor as we set our sights toward our next brilliant milestone, the Soka Gakkai's 100th anniversary in 2030. That's the end of chapter 18. We will finish this lecture next week. Chapter 19, page 175 will be done. Thank you.
Thank you.